Sasha, by the way, thank you.
Almost
Go
forgot about
ahead.
that.
Yep, me too.
Okay, Bill, do you want to, for the recording, do you want to repeat yourself?
Yeah, I'm just, yeah, certainly would love to. Bill Simmons with coordinating the Broadband Consortia of the Pacific Coast. Sasha.
All right, I'm Sasha Burrows, and I'm working with Bill at the BCPC as the Communications Associate.
Jamie, let's go to you next.
Jamie Fleming. I head the chamber here in Ojai, but I also have a partnership with the city itself, and I am tasked with managing any movement we have towards broadband. And to me, it's really exciting because we have so many issues here, from traffic and parking and things that I can see a smart city really solving. So that's why I've always had such enthusiastic interest to attend these. Of course, our frustration is it looks like we'll be the last to ever get connected up, but staying positive. Anyway, that's my background.
Thank you, Jamie. Steve Weingarten.
I'm the general manager for Ridge Communications in Southern California. We're based here in Southern California in Simi Valley. We're a services contractor, general contractor for wireless and broadband carriers like Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, Crown Castle. We do engineering, permitting, and construction throughout Ventura, Santa Barbara counties, and as well as Northern California.
Steve, is that a promotion?
Always.
You've always been the general manager?
Oh, well, we're not big on titles here, but
You're a modest guy.
it's a high sounding title, but I do everything from unload trucks to create budgets and manage P&L.
Yep. Greg Hayward.
Good morning, all. Greg Hayward, providing janitorial services to all the fine businesses throughout Ventura County, especially my own. We are grateful that we are pursuing phase two grants from the Air Force and the Army for trackable health. We have recently moved forward with our talks with the city of Moore Park about doing some IoT projects for OB Smart. And we are in the midst of putting a deal together with Emmett Smith's NASCAR team for Autoverse. So grateful to be here. I realize the importance of broadband from a long time back. I think it's something that is a right, just like water and utilities and such. So I appreciate all the good work that's been done.
For those that don't know, Greg, he was kidding about the janitorial service. Brian Chung.
Good morning, everyone. So Brian Chong from the city of Moore Park, and in addition to being one of the more aggressive jurisdictions in the broadband space in the Tri-County region, my actual day job is I run the city's public information and legislative affairs division. So I'm the city's lobbyist in Sacramento. Actually, I'm excited to see Steve Martin here from Paso. We work a lot in that space on a day-to-day basis. And I also run the city's social media website and a bunch of other random projects, including broadband.
Thank you, Brian. Noel Heredia.
Yeah, hi guys. Noel Heredia. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Digital Value Creation. We provide interim CTO services to small businesses and nonprofits. And our specialization is org design, process design, audits of existing IT operations, and helping particularly nonprofits be more compliant with all the regs that control their grants and other support that they get from their sponsors.
Thank you, Noel. Terry Theobald.
Hi, this is Terry Theobald. I'm the Chief Information Officer for Ventura County. To some degree, I don't even know what my day job is anymore, but I'm sort of leading the charge from the county's perspective on the middle mile projects, which you have heard presented here multiple times. That's it for me.
Thank you, Terry. Dana Stroud, thank you for being here. Good to see you again.
Good morning, Bill. It's nice to see you again, too. I'm Dana Stroud. I'm the business development specialist for GoBiz, covering the greater Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, Monterey, and San Benito counties, with a little dabbling into Ventura and Santa Cruz counties as well. And GoBiz obviously has a keen interest in, broadband connections, and we're working with Maria Kelly up here in the San Luis Obispo County area on, kind of putting some strategies together to help our local communities get going with their broadband efforts and connection efforts. So I apologize in advance. I have to hop off for 9 o'clock, but Bill, thank you for letting me join, and I'm looking forward to future opportunities to engage with this group and learn more about the work that you're doing and how state resources can play into all of that.
That's great, Dana. And Maria had a conflict this morning. She may be jumping on later from her morning conflict, but that's part of this evolution we're talking about, is how are we going to reinvent this forum to be kind of a north-south forum? And so there's a lot of conversations we'll be having in the next 30, 60 days about the best way to connect and stay communicating amongst ourselves. George Amendola.
Hello, good morning, everyone. George Amendola. My current endeavor is Cyber Dynamics Consulting, where we do privacy regulation and cybersecurity consulting, and I've established that business about 5 years ago. In addition, I currently am involved with Syncrasy.io, which is a digital transformation company, and we're specializing in IoT digital transformation. Previous to those experiences, I've had my own telecommunications carrier registered as a competitive local exchange carrier in the state of California and other states, as well as FCC registered long distance carrier with an international 214 license, where I supplied wholesale carrier services to other carriers here in the US and abroad. And previous to that, I was an officer of 2 NASDAQ companies, both pre-IPO and post-public offering, specializing in international carrier services globally. My main effort was Star Telecommunications, which was headquartered in Santa Barbara as a $1.6 billion carrier in the mid-90s. I was vice president of broadband services. Happy to participate with the Broadband Consortium Pacific Coast for about 7 years now, and looking forward to seeing more broadband deployments in the Central Coast area and Ventura County area. Look forward to seeing these endeavors, especially with this team now assembled and on this call. Thanks very much.
Thank you, George. Steve Martin, welcome. Sounds like you're muted, Steve. Or I don't see a mute sign, but yeah. Not sure what's going on with your microphone.
How's that?
Now we got volume. That's great.
I have too many microphones. I have a wealth of microphones. Steve Martin, Mayor of the City of Paso Robles, but right now we are in the process of exploring the possibility of receiving a certification for our airport as a spaceport and tying that to the development of a tech corridor in northern San Luis Obispo County. Working cooperatively with Dena and with Maria, also with Reach. And yesterday we had a meeting with the mayor of Atascadero, just to the south of us. Our 2 staffs were on board with that. We are also exploring the possibility of initiating a broadband strategy for northern San Luis Obispo County to kick that off and get that going. So a pleasure to be with you this morning.
Thank you for being here, Steve. Nikki Mays.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Nikki. I work for the city of Santa Paula here in Ventura County as a management fellow in the city manager's office. I work on a ton of issues, but broadband is one of the main ones. So I'm happy to be here and be included in these conversations, and it's good to see you all.
Chris Huffman.
Good morning, everyone. I'm kind of a last minute replacement for my boss, Louis Aroldas, who's the I'm the network manager for the city of Ventura. Louis is my boss. He's the IT manager for the city. He asked me to sit in on this meeting for him. I guess, so I'll probably be here primarily in a note-taking capacity. And of course, as the network guy, I'll cluck my tongue every time I think something's impossible. So.
Chris, you guys are doing some exciting things there in Ventura. And so we're just glad that you're here and glad that you're plugged into the conversation.
I appreciate being a part of it.
Yeah. Steve Sawyer.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. Steve Sawyer, Director of Government Affairs for Charter Communications, also known as Spectrum. We provide service to all cities and most of the unincorporated areas of Ventura County, providing up to 1 gig service. And we've got fiber going into every city within Ventura County. And good morning again.
Steve, don't sell yourself short. You go all the way up into San Luis Obispo and the North County of the Tri-County area as well.
That's true. That's true. But as you know, that's handled by a different government affairs person, Lisa Ludovici, who I'm sure the mayor knows very well. And I know they've had several meetings over the last several years about the various projects going on up in the Central Valley.
Yeah. Janice Petco.
I'm Janice Petco. I'm a solutions architect for the network expansion team of Astound Business Solutions. Until last week, we were formerly operating as Digital West on the Central Coast. Well, Tim Williams and I are developing public-private partnerships with multiple communities on the Central Coast in an effort to expand our fiber optic network. Good morning.
It's exciting about your name change, Janice.
It is exciting.
Yep. And is this week 1 of Astound?
It is week 1.
And I love the title Solutions Architect.
Thanks so much, Phil.
Yep. So with that in mind, thank you everybody for being here. And I've already gone through the agenda. Let me just spend a little bit of time with more context and background, and then we'll jump into talking about the middle mile. Before we get too far, Jamie's going to be leaving in a few minutes, and I wanted him to be able to provide, I'm going to just kind of make things up as we go in terms of the agenda based on people's availability and schedule. I want to make sure before we lose Terry Theobald that we do talk about Ventura and the middle mile conversation as well. And so just wanted to, if anybody needs to jump off, has something to say, feel free to interrupt, and we'll spend some time talking about those topics before you need to go. Jamie, why don't you give us the Ojai perspective before we lose you in 13 minutes, 12 minutes?
Well, nothing's really changed since the last meeting, but the one thing I really want to say is I would love to learn as much as I can as Greg and Craig worked on their project. I'm Brian, sorry, Greg and Brian.
Yeah.
I think that there are some things we could really learn that might be able to apply to Ojai, perhaps. And so if you guys wouldn't mind, I'd love to be brought into the loop once in a while to at least look over your shoulder and see what you might be thinking about as far as how using your technology, Greg, and how a city is using it.
Appreciate that very much, Jamie. We're glad to do so. Brian's intention is to start a process where technology like ours is tested POC kind of style in the city of Moore Park and then pushed out to everybody else to consider. So he's doing
Brian, I'd love to just, if you keep me in the loop at all a little bit, I'm really excited about this optical stuff and et cetera that Greg has.
Absolutely. Just shoot me an email with some dates and times and I'll share everything I know. Happy to help.
Okay, that's kind of it, Bill.
Okay, just giving everybody new to the conversation a little bit of context. We have a 3-legged stool that we talk about routinely. The first leg is infrastructure, and that's broadband itself, and that's really the heavy lift that we're working on today. The second piece is inclusion, and that is once you get the infrastructure in place, how do we go and talk about the literacy programs? The third leg, it's the 3 I's, is innovation. And Moore Park as a community has been out in this innovation space. They've been dealing with the other two I's and been very successful at it. The third I, the innovation piece, is the roadmap to the smart city. And so we're trying to just synthesize all of these pieces and parts of the conversation. We often find ourselves dealing with different departments or agencies or whatever, but broadband is where it starts. The learning and literacy comes next, and then the innovation and the transformation that's going to occur with technology is the third leg. And that's where we're talking there. Any other alerts, or can we keep moving? Terry, are you on a short schedule today?
Sorry, I have to leave here at 9:30. Thanks, Bill.
Okay, let me get through a couple of slides and I'll punt to you and then we'll circle around, okay?
Thanks.
So looking back at this last year, last couple of weeks, I've been spending a lot of time just going through and getting things wrapped up for the second year of this three-year grant. And I looked at, we were doing some work helping charter out wherever we could with letters of support and outreach in a couple of their projects. They were successful getting some CSF funding. It was a glorious day when we got funding. I think it was back in early December for Cuyama. And now that they're going to be putting fiber from Santa Maria through Cuyama all the way around to Maricopa, and to have fiber going up the hill is something, we all have been working on for quite some time. And so we had RDOF last year, and there were some projects in support from CSF for a number of providers related to the Rural Defense Opportunity Fund in some of the rural areas. The CHUMASH were very, very busy, and we had a number of grants that either they prepared for or conducted or were awarded. And then we had the Santa Barbara County strategy, which we'll talk about a little bit more in the slides to come. How we do the work, who we serve, work we do, that's morphing a little bit. I think that we started off as a consortium being very driven by CPUC, the rural areas, and really the adoption programs that CPUC funded. COVID changed everything, and I think there's a lot of discussion at this point about what the future of consortia is. I'm gonna continue to fight for the three I's. I think that it's much bigger than CPUC. I think we do need to talk as an organization, focus on the infrastructure, the inclusion, and then the innovation piece. But in terms of what CPUC pays us for, it's strictly infrastructure / inclusion aspect. And so we want to continue to be pushing and innovating in that space with the funds that are available. Moving on, this is the conversation today. And I put some funding sources here. There's some others. But what we try to do when we go into each community, in the month of December, we concluded going to every city council in Santa Barbara County. And the questions that I would ask is, what do you have today? What are the gaps? Where are the gaps? And where are you going to invest? Because we have all these funds coming, and if you can't answer the questions, you don't know you just don't know where to start. And so our purpose in going and conducting regional strategies and conducting conversations with each municipality is to be able to get to these answers, to be able to have some pile of evidence that says this is what we have today. The partners are convened. This is who's here. This is where we're going. This is what we're trying to do. Here are the gaps that we need funding for. And here are the funds. And you start mixing and matching the funds available to the needs. And here's the roadmap. I have no way in saying that we call it a strategy, but I'm in no way of saying it's a strategic plan. What it is getting everybody on the same page and organized, because there are great consultants, there are great resources in the space, there's great funds that are available, but unless you know what you know, and not everybody does, and when I say know what you know, it's these three questions. You don't know where to start. And so just getting everybody aware and sensitive to the tranches, for lack of a better word, that's what they call it, a tranche of funding coming rolling down our direction. Until we can get everybody aware of the tsunami of resources coming our way, they're not going to be able to take advantage of it and learn to surf. And that's what we want them to do. So anyway, it's a good question, and we'll keep asking it over the months to come. So this is a slide we used this last week in talking to SBCAG. It's the equivalent of BCPC, the Transportation Commission in Santa Barbara County. It's when we talk about the project of this year that they're asking the consortia to lead, it's, you know, here's the things we plan to do. It is we're doing some planning, and then we'll be doing some data collection. I like the little graphic on the right that kind of summarizes this. There's a wash, rinse, and repeat cycle in terms of data and validation and data and validation and data and validation, and then priorities and projects that come out of the outcomes. But we're surveying the areas, we're conducting certain convenings with stakeholders, we're going through a data collection mode, we're going to be providing some maps, we're going to be coordinating policies and then coming up with outcomes. The interesting part about this is we're going to be doing it individually, but everybody's doing it together, if that makes sense. Because I would not expect one community's plan to be like any other community's plan, but somehow or another, at some point, the plans all need to connect. And that's what we're really trying to do is help them be, by being a connector and by having these conversations. Why would you want, in Santa Barbara County, there's 8 cities, why would you want 8 different dig once policies? You know, that kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. And so at the regional level, if you can start having these meaningful conversations about zoning and ordinance and permitting and policies, you know, and try to come up with the standards, but also do it in a way where you're convening all the cities to do it together in the same way, in the same manner, becomes a heck of a lot easier to deploy. You know, you have all the telecoms coming, and as they cross municipal boundaries, they're you know, they've already got a green light. I mean, it just makes a lot of sense. And so it's, I don't know why this is so novel. It makes sense. At the same time, it's very unique that we've been able to pull it off and make it happen. And we're hoping that the other 2 counties, Ventura and San Luis Obispo, at some point will be able to follow and do the same kind of thing. And so, Brian, I keep looking at you as an advocate in trying to pull these together. There is to really line up the ducks, there is a herding cats aspect to all of this.
Yeah, and actually, if, just a moment of inspiration perhaps, but the model you described was done extremely well by the California Film Commission maybe 10 years ago, where they understood that every community had different concerns for regulating filming, but what they did was they unified the structure. So, you know, whether you can, you know, you have to stop filming at 11 p.m. or at midnight or 10 o'clock, that's policy for each community. But what they did was for location managers, they said every film ordinance in the state will be structured the same. So when you want to know what the filming hours are, you always go to section 3. And when you want to know what the insurance requirements are, you always go to section 4, whether it was 1 million or 2 million coverage or whatever it was, you could unify that. So I could see that applying here, where you say, here's the data collection, here's the data we're all going to collect, here's the areas that are unserved, which is of course going to be different everywhere, and here's, you know, here's the structure of a dig once policy, and maybe this jurisdiction is saying you have to give 30-day notice for people to co-locate. Another one might say 21 days or whatever it is, but you know, when you look, you're saying, I'm going to come to this area, here's the requirements I'm looking for, and I know it's going to be on page 5. It does work, and they were a very good model for it.
Steve, I give Maria Kelly all the credit for Santa Barbara. I mean, when she was with the REACH group, wearing that hat, working with us as a consortium, it was her brainchild to try to move to the county level with the ARPA funds and put this together. And SBCAG stepped up and showed some great leadership regionally. I know the politics of your county is so different than the other 2, but we're different from each other with Santa Barbara and Ventura County. And so every county is going to have to get there the same way. And, you know, your version of civic leadership is just appreciated. And I know that Paso with your spaceport that you're going to be having there at your airport shows great civic leadership on your part. And so we'll look forward to how this unfolds in your community as well. So any other conversations about this before we jump into the middle mile discussion? I'd like to George, go ahead.
Yep, Bill, you touched on the subject of, as an example with Santa Barbara County, 8 different cities in Santa Barbara County, and each of those cities having a dig once policy separately. You know, why would they do that? And, you know, that leads us into a discussion that we touched on last month. And then coincidentally, Brian Chong and I, we had a brief conversation yesterday afternoon. And, you know, there's a significant debate here as a topic. And Brian pointed out to me yesterday a couple things from his perspective, which I think were at the core of maybe what the obstacles are to coming up with some kind of dig once policy at each municipal level or the county level or the regional level. And it's about, you know, licensed carriers, right-of-way usage, notifications to, you know, the standard AT&T, Verizon type of carriers when there are public works projects. But what appears to be missing, and this is my interpretation from what Brian and I spoke about yesterday, what appears to be missing is all the independent, smaller operators or ISPs, or, you know, even companies like Steve Weingarten's company as an independent operator. Anyway, that's just something that came to mind when you introduced that topic right now, and pointing out that maybe it's worthy of a whole segment. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Any other comments before we move on? What has spent some considerable time talking about middle mile, and so you've all probably seen this before. This is a proposed middle mile network with Ventura County. I think it was this last week, not this week, but last week, I sat in a middle mile conversation presented by Scenic, who's this integrator. They now have 2 companies. It's the same entity, but Scenic itself continues to be the company. It's a not-for-profit that provides schools connectivity statewide. They're also the middle mile integrator for this new middle mile network for the state. And they called it Golden State Net. That's the name of it. So when you see Scenic versus Golden State Net, the answer is yes, they're the same. In listening to the presentation, I was sharing with some friends yesterday that clearly what happened when they put the middle mile proposal together for the state of California, they looked at areas of need up and down the state, whether they were proven with data or anecdotal or whatever it was. We know that there's problems here. We want to connect them. We want to connect them to the middle mile. By connecting them to the middle mile, the theory is you will have access to that area and providers want to come in and do the last mile. That's the theory. The concern I have is that's no way to really build a network. I mean, you have one attribute and you have one area, one demand signal that's, you know, and you haven't done the analysis on economic development and employers and demand signals and all the other aspects that are going to happen, the traffic that you'll need and in the services that you'll be able to do. So to just say we're going to construct an entire network based on communities of need, you know, will work if the communities of need work. And you know, and there is something to be said of the reason why carriers may not be going there is because it doesn't pencil out and it's not a good investment necessarily. And so there is a role for the public side to make that investment in that area. On the other hand, we may be creating a network that carriers may be reticent to use, and it may not be able to really fully develop. It may not, for those people that are going to be strategic about certain developments and opportunities, we may want the capacity somewhere else and it may not be there. So anyway, long story short, I don't mean it to sound like a criticism, although it does. It's just I wouldn't do it that way. I would have taken a little bit more time and put a little bit more thought into it. The 18 pilots are there. They came out very fast. Not exactly sure where they came from, how they got to those things, but there's a lot of lessons learned. we're going to stay very plugged in. When you look at the map in Ventura County that network emulates, it doesn't look anything at all like this. There's lines that go and they come to a dead stop. You know, in the plan that we have some deliberate redundancy. We have some loops that if something severs, you know, you've got backup access into these areas. I mean, there's a reason why it's architected the way and designed the way it is. You know, the Caltrans scenic overlay of this from the statewide network is nothing close, and it has blind alleys and dead ends and those kinds of things. So it's just, we have to work with them. We're going to align with them. We're going to do everything we can to do it together in a collaborative way, but it doesn't totally answer the mail that we would want to regionally. And so I did want to talk about the state perspective, and we're going to continue to be engaged, trying to influence the direction it's going. But I'm going to yield to Terry at this point to just talk about the local perspective, where this came from, what we're doing, and where we're going to go next with it, and how do we pull it all together.
All right, thanks, Bill. Good morning, everyone. Making sure my mute is off. Okay.
You're good.
So where did it come from? Well, honestly, this middle mile network was something that Bill and Magellan had been working on for some time with my predecessor. So really, I inherited it. And my primary contribution to this was to just start making decisions on options that were presented by Bill and Magellan. And this map is essentially the result. I think it's important. It has multiple points of connection to the internet. We originally planned Santa Clarita. We added one in Agoura Hills, and we're also still considering and likely to pick up the one in Simi Valley. We've also considered going north out of Ventura into Santa Barbara County to pick up a northerly connection there, thinking that if something significant happened in the LA region, it's possible that one Wilshire would be taken out, and Santa Clarita, Simi, and Agoura all go in that direction. So if our county is spared whatever happens, having a connection in the north direction would be a good idea. So the other thing that we've been doing on the middle mile front, again, we presented this multiple times, is finding a way to get it funded. So, you know, like everybody else, we were hanging out waiting for the money from the federal infrastructure bill. We were excited to hear about Newsom's $6 billion, state open access middle mile. And I mean, that's been going on for less than a year, I think, at this point. And we're not on anybody's plan right now. And I think part of that is just the slow process by which funding is made available. But I also think that there are other voices louder than ours. So in that regard, we are currently looking at the following options. We continue to work with SCAG and SANDAG through the joint effort to influence CPUC and now Scenic to get on the project list. We weren't part of the original 18. I don't have a strong opinion that we will be on the next group of projects either. However, I maintain the position through my contacts and through Bill and Magellan that we are one of the more advanced shovel-ready projects in California. And as such, we would be a good candidate for CPUC or Golden State Network / Scenic to essentially subcontract us to do this work. And when I say subcontract to us, I mean that the county would take over the project management of this area for this network, and then we would work with the telecom providers and any other resources we needed to implement this. We continue we've also restarted our own grant funding program. We've hired a grant writer to help us go after some money that would allow us to get started on this. While there was an earlier comment about Ojai being last, I don't know that Ojai will be last, but what I do believe we need to do is we need to focus on the 126 to be first. And the reason we need to do that is, one, it gives us the Ventura County Transportation Commission's rail line as a very convenient right of way, which should make it less expensive and quicker to implement. And the other reason is it touches several disadvantaged areas along the route, plus one of the major up and coming commercial areas in the Fillmore area. So with those reasons are important when we're going after grant money, to demonstrate that this is a high value investment that with a lot of payback potential that we would want to support. Our intention is to build every single one of the lines on this map before we're done. Now, having said that, I'm going to shift gears because my focus since I've been involved with this project, which is about 1.5 years now, has been on this middle mile network and bringing the vision into focus, and then now trying to turn it into a reality. But Bill made a comment earlier about the multiple legs of the stool and essentially the final mile. And the more I think about the final mile, the more I think, it's what we're kind of doing now is we're saying we're going to build freeways or we're going to build aqueducts to bring them to areas. And we talk sort of generally about what we're going to do with those, but we need to start talking specifically about exactly what we're trying to do there. And the reason why I say that is because, as it's been pointed out many times, there's telecom providers, ISPs in most of the areas we're talking about serving with this middle mile network. And the question keeps coming up, why are you doing what you're doing when we're already there? Well, that's a great point. Why are we doing what we're doing if there's already telecom providers there? And one of the answers that keeps coming back, and I love this statement, it's got to pencil out. Well, I believe it's not going to pencil out. We've talked about using the gift of government money through these grant programs to basically hire ISPs to build out middle mile networks so that they then can serve these communities. But if they're already there, then why would we do that? And the short answer in my mind is we do that because there are people that cannot afford broadband. There are people that need to have a higher level of capacity. In other words, I live in Westlake Village, and up until recently, I think my maximum download speed was 6 meg. And I won't mention which telecom provider provided that, but I can say it was DSL. And that just doesn't work anymore. I'm not sure 20 works anymore. I'm currently running at 100, and I wish I had a little more for all the video conferencing, and I do some telemedicine and some other things here. So the old standard doesn't cut it. So we need to have higher bandwidth. So the question really is, then, great, we've got a middle mile, but what are we going to do with it when we're done? And I think that's where I'll leave it, because to me, that's really the focus now. I think this will eventually come into play, but it would certainly be not good if we built this all out and then we're still trying to figure out how we're going to light up whoever it is we think we need to light up with this middle mile network, and eventually bring this promise of closing the digital divide to bear. So that's my comments, Bill. Thank you for letting me say that.
Yeah, one more topic related, Terry, that I'm going to tee up for you, and you can finish off as well. The conversation goes to Nikki Mays, Chris Huffman, Santa Paula, Ventura. As we put together this EDA grant, what we're going to be doing is coming to your communities and talking about, and I guess Brian Chong as well, because Brian and I have been assigned the Master of Letters of Support. But we're going to Ventura and Santa Paula uniquely for this EDA, for this first leg of the middle mile network. We're going to need to know business parks that are going to be done. We're going to need to know potential jobs or employers that are going to be served. We're going to need to know perhaps middle mile job schools, the kinds of things that if you had an inexhaustible source of broadband, how would your community benefit? And that's going to require some data collection. And so that will feed into what, Terry, what is it, 30, 45 days of preparing the EDA application? The EDA, to get the funding to build this thing, really wants to know the economic impact of these communities that are going to be connected. And so we'll want to work very closely with you in Santa Paula, with Fillmore, Chris, you in Ventura, to mobilize. And there'll be a data call of sorts where we'll say, here's what the application's asking for. We'll want to come to you and, you know, try to figure out what data we're going to need to start building the case for EDA to get the funding. And then obviously we're not just going to be asking you for the data, but when they actually build a network, we're going to want to turn around and maybe have programs that capitalize on this new capacity that's in place and actually do something with it. So Terry, anything you want to add for that?
Well, I will say that one of the county-owned areas that we would want to do something with along this this 126 route would be Satakoy. And so one of the things I've talked to Bill about is really getting down to almost the address level and say, okay, we're going to have this middle mile coming down the railway. We're going to have a takeoff, a pull box near Wells Road, because that's where we're talking about. That's where Satakoy is at. Where exactly are we going to go? There's some relatively new, I say new, I guess it was probably 15 years ago, they started building some houses, apartments in that area that may be served well, I'm not sure. But I know there's, I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's near Nardo. It's actually a street, but it's more of an alleyway right along a railway, another railway over there, I think, that people expanded and rented out back, you know, the garages and things like that. And I'm not really sure how they're being served, if at all. So if those folks there aren't being served, then my first question is going to be, what telecom is in this area, and why hasn't that been taken care of yet? And I'm guessing it's because it hasn't penciled out. So now the county is going to have this capability to deliver broadband kind of to the outskirt of this neighborhood. So how are we going to make that happen? Do we have a telecom provider that's going to go in there and work with us with some of this funding we get to do the final mile? If so, are they going to charge them $60 a month? Are they going to charge them $40 a month? EBB will eventually wear out, so I'm not sure I'm going to count on that. I don't think we should count on that in the long run. So how's that all going to work? This is how I think. I tend to think in terms of specific examples and how we're going to solve that specific problem. And I think I'll go back to Brian's point, because I thought the film industry one was pretty good, a little different, but very similar. You know, you have these entities that want to go into these cities, and they want to have an easy way to do it, to manage their own costs. And the cities want to help out because the cities want the revenue from all the other people that are in there being part of the filmmaking process. So that's a win-win for everybody. We need to create, and what Brian was talking about was an industry-wide kind of city and private industry working together to create an overall benefit for the city, kind of a non-specific, but overall benefit for the city. Here I'm talking about, you know, 1357 Nardo doesn't have service. So how are we going to get them service? Is the telecom provider going to provide that? And are they going to charge them? And is that going to work? Or is the county going to have to bring public works in to do that? And if the county does it, then how is that going to work? So I think in the case of one of these areas, I picked Satakoy because it's one that we would have to deal with as a county. I kind of want to go through it address by address and find out what's going on and how we're going to solve the final mile for them. And I think we should be working on that now while we wait for the funding on the first middle mile network to come through.
So we're hyper local, right? We're the city. So our interest is getting the last mile. The middle mile interest that we have is to the extent that it will enable us to build or facilitate building the last mile. So what we did to kind of bridge that gap, it is that meet me room where we would love to have the county in our Meet Me room. And we've, in our outreach to ISPs, generally this is small to medium ones who are most interested in doing it. They have verbally said, several of them, if it were physically built right here, we would be in it. And they would be basically using us as a hub. And I can truly point to, if we had this thing today, whether it was a county feeding in as the middle mile connection, then they would say, this business park right over here, we would light this up. We've already done the market analysis, but it does not pencil when we have to connect all the way to downtown LA, at least fiber to feed it. So there are some resources to do it. And even before we had Magellan reach out to these ISPs, just through the consortium and talking to, back when it was Digital West, they were actually the first one we talked to. There definitely is interest out there among the ISPs to do that last mile. I don't worry about that so much as I worry about getting it to pencil, because someone has to build that infrastructure. And for us, it's a Meet Me room. For you, it's a middle mile. And we need funding. But I'm less concerned about your concern of, if you build it, they will come. I'm confident they will come.
Yeah, so thanks, Brian. And I appreciate the meeting room point, and we definitely would want to be in there to support that. Where I run into, I'm going to pick Nyland as one of my examples, and I think Steve Sawyer's on the call too. We've talked a little bit about this. So Nyland is already, quote, lit up, I think. There are charter is in Nyland, but their business penetration in Nyland isn't what I think they want, and the residents in Nyland don't believe that they're getting the level of support or that they need. And they bring up two issues. The first issue is cost of service, not cost of installing infrastructure, but cost of service. And surprisingly, at least to me, it was. The second one is anonymity. There's a lot of people in Nyland that don't want to give their personal information to an ISP so that they can access the internet. So those are not pencil. Well, one of them's the pencil out. The other one's not a pencil out issue. And this goes back to the point of Bill, that it's not as simple as the technology necessarily and how this gets deployed. I'm sure there's people on this call probably that have solved those problems. I guess I just haven't gotten in deep enough to understand how those problems are being solved exactly. And I actually want to be able to replicate some of those somewhere from the start, so we can actually say, here we're going to start with nothing. How is this all going to work out for us?
We're aware of that issue of trust in Moore Park, and we have not solved that problem or found a way around that. So we're also interested in anyone who has been able to bridge that trust gap.
Yeah, well, here was another interesting stat you just reminded me of. I actually did, I'll admit to this, I didn't know about this EBB subsidy the federal government offers, the one that renewed for $20 less benefit than before. And so one of the statistics that came out as I was looking into this, that within the county, they show like 859,000 residents, and something like 1,300 of them have registered for EBB. Now, I know the 850 something residents includes children and all that kind of stuff, but still 1,300 people in the county registered for EBB. And I want to say we have close to 30,000 identified households that might want this. I'm just not sure why that gap is there.
One of the solutions is innovation, and I don't mean that from a tech standpoint, but it's innovation as a business model. And one of the success stories I keep trying to push out there is what's happened in Santa Barbara County, where instead of the ISPs knocking on the door to try to sell a subscription, what they ended up doing is pushing through the school system and the need to be reaching all the kids, the accounts, and the school system actually paid the ISP for the service rather than the subscribers that want to maintain their anonymity. And so they had these families, and the families would be getting the service from the school to keep the kids in school from a distance learning standpoint. But the school system acted as a buffer, and they didn't ask the questions. They already had the relationship with the student and the student's family, and they were getting the emergency broadband benefit that they could pass the cost to that student at that residence back to the provider. And so it was a different way to a different business model. And I think that kind of innovation has got to occur in some of these cases. That we may need some intermediaries. We may need some trusted agents, in terms of other organizations. There are going to have to be other ways rather than the single carrier to an address, relationship where we make sure the address is connected, but the anonymity is maintained. So those are all going to be interesting conversations, interesting models that we can point to and say, if you're having problems that way, here's another way you might think about it, and let everybody see that this is a different way of doing it, but we still accomplish what we're setting out to accomplish. Yeah, I think you got the same kind of situation, Terry, in Island Acres. I mean, clearly, where they have an issue with a carrier, whether it's made up or otherwise, it's more of a traditional fear. You've got the innovator coming in there as a trusted agent that's working with a school system, and they're trying to figure out how to extend it from the classroom. And there's a different level of trust in that relationship. So we'll work through it. We've got to solve these problems and make it work for everybody. It's all good. But to the point, Nikki, I was going to let you know that we'll be wanting to connect you with Terry as Terry goes through the EDA process for the middle mile. The point is, fiber's coming through town. It's got to be a catalyst for the town saying, what do we do with it? How can we use it? How do we benefit and try to use the presence of it coming through town to be a catalyst for all of this last mile conversation, communities in need, economic development, all of that. Have we exhausted this topic? I think so. But if there's any other comments, we can move on. And I think we could probably do a quick wrap and get out a little bit early. Terry's already talked about the last mile pilots. I throw Santa Paula in there and Oxnard and Guadalupe. I've been talking to Nikki about some SCAG work that we're trying to do about communities in need. And so we're looking forward to moving that kind of a partnership forward. Guadalupe up north, I know that there's communities in the San Luis Obispo area that should be on this as well. Oxnard. This is, we're going to have to be innovative. The 2 points that I was wanting to make as we were talking about at the very beginning about transforming what our work is, it's not enough to just talk about broadband. Looking for real work, heavy lifting to be done in the next 6 months, 12 months in middle mile and inclusion activities, really attracting resources, attracting funds. And I'm going to call these pilots because it's going to take a while to actually build it all out. It will take over 2 or 3 years, but we have to gather here and now the intelligence necessary to know what we're doing. We're going to make mistakes. And the whole purpose of a pilot is to make those mistakes, refine the approach, and get good at doing what we say we're going to do and learn from it. And so anytime we can go and demonstrate in Santa Paula, in Satacoy, or all of these towns, working with trusted agents, working with partners, knocking on doors, dealing with the literacy issues, transforming neighborhoods one neighborhood at a time. If we can really demonstrate what we do and that it does work and there are positive outcomes, then people are going to want to fund us to do it throughout. So we don't know what we don't know. We've got to learn. And with that, I did want to mention that just give you a heads up that we are doing some work with SCAG. I think you've seen the surveys in our weekly updates for the last few weeks. We're going to be pulling all of that together a week from today. You'll be seeing a notice coming out of a stakeholder meeting, and we'll be briefing the results of all the surveys and trying to digest what they mean, what they say, having a conversation very much like this. I'm going to be targeting everybody that completed a survey. A number of you, Brian, thank you for doing that and helping to get other people to do that as well. I'll be targeting you, but I'm also going to be wanting to invite our entire mailing list to listen in as well to the conversation. But one of the tasks we have is to reconvene the stakeholders, present the summation of the data that they've been contributing, and then ask the question, now that we know what we know, what does it mean? What do we do? And so that'll be an interesting conversation a week from now. You'll be seeing notices early next week, and then we'll follow up with another notice probably Wednesday, just inviting everybody to be there. And with that, those were the comments that I wanted to make. Any other updates? Brian, Nikki, you want to talk any more about Moore Park, Santa Paula, providers? If you have updates you'd like to make, this is the time to share.
Here in Santa Paula, Frontier's been doing a lot of work laying fiber, or I guess installing aerial fiber all over town. And I think that's anticipated to kind of be done for the whole town in March. I know I just signed up for their services. So that's happening, but we still need to sit down and talk to the government relations rep here at the city just to get more info on like what the prices are going to be, whether there's affordable options for communities and families in Santa Paula. But that's an update that we have.
It's really an exciting update too, Nikki. I was touching base with Nikki yesterday and showing him we have a house out there in Santa Paula. Our kids bought it from us. We moved out in Santa Paula in '86, but Frontier's got the door hangers. Fiber is coming, and to have fiber throughout Santa Paula is quite an achievement. And it's just one leg. And it's the first step. We still have to deal with all of the literacy issues and all of the making sure that there are connections to that fiber. And then we talk about smart city visions and the innovation piece of it all. It's the other two legs, but it's solid movement. It's a good news story, and we're happy to see it happening in Santa Paula.
Yeah, on the Moore Park side, I just want to share a few things. On the funding side, so tons of federal money, tons of state money. And I want to thank Magellan, not in our consultant role, but on their kind of marketing role. They've had multiple webinars about funding pools, and that's been a great source of information for us. But we've looked at 18 funding sources that have come out over the last 12 months. Of those, 10 we're not eligible for. 6 we might be eligible for, but we're waiting for final rules and seeing what the eligibility requirements ultimately will be. And of those 18, only 2 we actually are eligible for. The hope in Washington for the second big infrastructure bill, that bill in its form is basically dead, and its future will be in incremental things. So whether it's, pick your favorite thing, universal pre-K, climate change, broadband, they're likely to have to be pursued individually. And we'll have to see what happens if there's another wave of federal funding coming. Bill mentioned this earlier, but on January 5th, we took to our city council a roughly 1-year progress report on the city's broadband strategic plan. We've done about 2/3 to 3/4 of the things in that plan. Several of the big items are pending and a couple were actually deferred. But as far as bureaucratic things, permit streamlining, making sure that broadband interests are engaged early on in development processes. We have our first capital project that, it's a parking lot repaved, but we're also redoing a sidewalk, and you bet your butts we're putting in broadband conduit underneath that sidewalk as part of the project. We're about to go out to bid for our first big road project. Since we pulled the trigger and inserted this into our workflows, that one has 2 conduits going in as we're rebuilding Princeton Avenue here in Moore Park. The Meet Me Room market study, we were hoping to get done this month, but it's going to be pushed. And shout out to Kevin Pasasich in Oxnard. He came forward with 2 other firms to contact as potential tenants. So Magellan has actually reached out to them and scheduling those. And of course, if that changes the calculus, if they're interested in being part of a Meet Me Room to help fund that construction, that of course would be a good thing. We also, just to say that the things that we're not doing currently, we still have to do our Dig Once policy. That's on our list to do in our Public Works Department. We have a consultant that we're hiring right now to do a study of a broadband impact fee. So all these things cost money, and typically you would tax something, right, as a government to fund these things. And broadband impact fees are the cutting edge right now, and you want to make sure you're most legally protected and not going to spend all that money fending off lawsuits for whoever it is you're taxing, whether it's residents, businesses, new development, whoever it is. So this fee study consultant is going to be doing that. We also have deferred a market study on the viability of leasing out a city-owned network. Now, our network is decades out, so it's just one of those things that doesn't make sense to do now if you're not going to actually connect anything for many, many years. The other one is Magellan in our strategic plan had recommended that we just set aside a pool of money to co-locate along our city network. And with the COVID era of budgeting, when we did this last summer and the uncertainty with it, it was a very tough thing politically to say, well, we're considering, financial austerity, but we want to set aside $100,000 for some project that we don't know where it is, we don't know what it is or who it is. It's a very tough thing to set aside money in that environment. So that's still on our list of recommendations, but that we aren't doing. And then if you want to take a look at our report to council and the updates that they had, it is on our website at moreparkca.gov/city council meetings, and just navigate to the January 5th meeting and you can watch the PowerPoint, watch the meeting. The other fun part of that, which Bill also alluded to earlier, was we presented to our council a Smart Cities Technology Report that was prepared for us by Future Labs, which is Brian Wentz' outfit, who's often on these calls. And what he and his team did, it was Zoom because of COVID, but spent hours and hours meeting with all of our middle managers and field leads saying, here's what we do, here's what we wish something could do better, and then combine that with Brian's experience on the cutting edge of technology scouting. They couldn't solve all of our things, personal jetpacks for police officers, those don't really exist yet, for example. But they came back with a list that said, here are vendors who do things that would help your municipal operation, from smart lighting to building and solar and energy generation to stormwater sensors. So, hey, there's a pollutant coming in, or hey, there's no flow and it's raining in this storm drain, it's clogged. Let me send a text message to someone to go out there and unclog that storm drain. So all kinds of things. And a lot of those are facilities based. We're actually building a library and we are moving city halls, actually, where we are closing escrow this month on a new building. So a lot of those are going to come into play a little later. But on the immediate front, there were 3 things that they wanted us to pursue. 2 more mundane, kind of simple things, but the fun cutting edge one is Greg Hayward's company, ObiSmart, with the object sensors. And we are basically going to enter into a retainer contract to do 2 or 3 projects to utilize the technology, confirm it works, and have a real world use for this. And I don't know, Greg, if you wanted to maybe share a little more.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brian. We've been given the opportunity to be an integrator for a hardware and software solution called OStream that has been supported by Semtech and Amazon and some really big players in the space. And what we're doing is providing sensors that are basically business spectrometers. And so they can extract whatever data without capturing images to keep the privacy, concerns in place. But things that we can do, for instance, are being able to have sensors along the 118 that count gravel trucks and the direction they're traveling, the speed they're traveling at, frequency, whatever it may be, or a dog park and who comes and goes and how much usage and all those kinds of metrics. or a playground, and you can point it to see which of the equipment is the most popular and which is the least utilized. So you can understand the value better. So that expends out exponentially, because really, as I told the city council, their expectation defines our solution. And so whatever you want to point these sensors at, we can pull data through. And we've been talking to Jamie up in Ojai about doing a parking lot monitoring with the same kind of metrics coming out of it. So we're grateful for the opportunity. It was nice that Future Labs really highlighted us and gave us that segue, and that Moore Park and Brian's efforts are allowing us to really do something tactile.
We're super excited to do that as a staff here as well. A couple other things just for the other communities that aren't here, our other local governments. Kevin Pasasic is actually leaving Oxnard, if you haven't heard. He's going to be a broadband deployment guy for the state of Connecticut, which is pretty cool.
He had left. He's gone.
Yep.
Yeah. So we should have thrown if we hadn't been in a virtual world, we probably should have thrown a going away party for him. I feel like we're losing a dear friend from this group.
Yep. And also, I did confirm with my colleagues in Simi Valley that Sci-Fi is actually imminently building part of their promised network for Simi Valley. They have failed miserably at a number of jurisdictions that they've contracted with, Ventura locally, probably the most notable one. But for whatever reasons, they are actually building something in Simi. So I don't know exactly what it is, but it is happening.
They're building a fiber network that is proposed to pass every residence and business in Simi Valley. I saw an article in the Star a couple of weeks ago about it, and I thought to myself, I don't know anything about that, and it's right in our backyard, Ridge. So I did reach out to Sci-Fi and confirmed. I've been talking to them about possibly helping with the build and with maintenance of the network. I think that they're probably attempting to bring a bundled service to residences and businesses. Beyond that, beyond the nuts and bolts of placing fiber in the street, and service drops to residences and businesses. I don't know too much about it. I don't know what they're offering or what their plan is. It's fairly ambitious to take on the incumbent carriers because despite what people may say about their incumbent carrier, there's generally not a whole lot of migration away from them, so it's pretty bold if that's what they're doing. Apparently they've done it other places, and we've got Janice here with us who's got far more experience in taking on the incumbents. But yeah, it is happening in Simi. I was surprised since it had never come up to my knowledge or my remembrance on any of our Ventura County broadband meetings.
Yeah, so I can throw a little history in there. I was with Simi Valley for 15 years before I went over to Moore Park. But Simi was not part of the regional efforts at all, not part of the consortium. And the first anyone I think here heard of it was when Simi just announced, oh, we've agreed to terms with this company Sci-Fi. It was right about the time that Ventura was engaging with them. And everyone was like, where the heck did that come from? And the look at it, which was similar to how Ventura looks at their agreement with them in hindsight now, was it sounded almost too good to be true.
Yep.
That you're investing all this money, taking on all the risks that you alluded to, of taking on incumbents, and you're gonna build it on every street and every cul-de-sac. Like, my goodness, like if it were that easy, wouldn't everyone else have already done that? So it happened years ago, and then it was just quiet for years.
I had coffee at the time with Brian Kabler, and I was talking with him about a cautionary tale, and he said, not to worry. He says it's not costing us anything. The risk is all on them. I mean, it's, we're granting them right away, but they're not exclusive to it. If anybody comes with the same offer, we'll do the same thing with anybody.
Yeah.
So it was, they had nothing to lose and everything to gain from it. And so it was
Granting them right of way in exchange for what? Because the cable TV company has to pay a pretty dear price for the use of that public right of way.
Yeah, the model is Sci-Fi is not an ISP. What they're doing is they're offering 3 to 4 other ISPs through the fiber that they're putting in. They're basically an asset holder, an asset manager in terms of their business model. And
that's mostly correct.
Yeah.
Going back to the discussion earlier, because Sci-Fi is not a license holder, they do not have the ability to do this without having someone grant them a contractual right of use. They are not a public utility. They're not registered with California Public Utilities Commission. They require a contracted right of use. And in essence, they say it's a public-private partnership. Looking at the public records from the city adjacent to Santa Ana, it slips my mind. It's a 30-year contract. Yorba Linda is possibly
Fullerton. It's Fullerton.
Fullerton, thank you.
I think they mentioned, Fullerton, Yorba Linda, and Placentia.
Yes. So what I read was the contract is initially 30 to 60 years, possibly 90 years. And they do not provide services directly. They're an underlying carrier that will lease and provide services to other carriers or other service providers to use that network. And now, the benefit is, if they actually do what they say they're going to do, is they say they're going to deliver fiber at the last mile to every residence. But let me just call on, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, Janice, providing historically, from a carrier perspective, providing standalone services to residential, going back to Terry's comments, do not necessarily pencil out. There have to be other revenue mechanisms. Would you agree with that in some form?
Well, it's interesting. Again, as you know, when we were Digital West before the acquisition last year, we had never really delved that far into the residential side of things, but now we actually have a residential arm of the company. So I have been learning more about that. But the residential business model is very different than the commercial one. And for example, going back to what was being said about Nyland Acres, we've been looking at that. We've been looking at Staticoy. We've been looking at all the different residential areas that were talked about earlier. But it's very different than the way that a business-focused telecom carrier looks at the world. But it'll be interesting to see what Sci-Fi actually really does deliver in Simi Valley, because I think all of us have been on the sidelines looking at their business model and trying to determine if they're actually going to deliver on what they promise. Because they've certainly said a lot and not really done anything in the California marketplace. I mean, I think Fullerton's their big success story. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Yep.
So going back to that comment about not being a licensed carrier, the question I have as far as this concept of public funding coming down from the Fed through these various funding components, whether it's coming from the Fed, the state, or it's to the counties or the cities directly, or if it's coming from SCAG, if you were not a licensed carrier, are you included or precluded from using some of those funding sources?
I don't know that answer.
I think it depends. I mean, I think the answer is yes. In some sources that you may be precluded, but in other sources, they're encouraging those municipalities, those entities, those not-for-profits, anybody to be making applications to go in this direction.
And,
I don't
and then
think
when it
there's-
comes to the, like Terry brought up EBB, and then we looked at CASF, et cetera.
Mhm.
Do you need to be a licensed carrier to offer the
Not to tap,
subsidies?
not to tap those resources, no.
But what about to offer the subsidies to the end user, the actual person who would need the services for a discounted rate?
Once again, I think it depends. So,
Having looked at a dozen and a half of these programs, they're all different. I assume CASF you do have to be licensed, but I can't go for CASF money until this year when a law change took effect. But they're all different.
Right. Yeah, thank you. Because those have always been my concerns operating my utility. What funding can I use?
Yeah.
And, you know, do I require a license?
the one, yeah, and we made the point about rulemaking. I mean, it's an arduous process. I lose patience every day, you know, waiting for, but the technical assistance money out of the CASA fund, I do see an awful lot of that. The CHUMASH picked up some dollars last year. And I see all the communities and all of the organizations, SBCAG and others, going to be wanting to make applications, build capacity in their staff, get into this space and be able to manage this space, create plans in this space. You know, all of this is going to be funded, I think, through CASF and CPUC as we get into this next year. And it's not going to be just carriers receiving the funds, but it's going to be municipalities and everybody moving in to solve this problem. Other thoughts?
Dialogue there, that was.
Yeah. Any other topics for the good of the order? Well, that was a great conversation, my friends. And I think that as we get into the Santa Barbara situation, we're going to be getting, you know, more data centric. As we start compiling data, we're going to be able to share much more in the map space. We're going to want to talk much more in the policy space because we get to be more specific because, you know, I intend to be, you know, very open as we are asking questions there. I'm going to be wanting to come to you and be asking the same questions and using as a sounding board. So we've been talking vision stuff and strategy stuff, but I think we're going to be getting into this new season of execution. And as we propose policies and share it amongst ourselves, we're going to be wanting to, you know, not just do it in one county, but do it in all 3 counties. And so that's kind of the direction this is all going to go. And we're going to transform. Any other thoughts? Going once? Going twice? All right.
Quick
Thanks,
question. Third week in February for the next meeting?
Yes,
Thank you.
that's the plan, but that may change.
Okay.
We'll keep it penciled in.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right,
Bud.
everybody. Have a great day, great week.
Bye.
Good day.
Bye.